2.5 millennia ago, long before Europeans set eyes on the rainforest, a vast network of roads, plazas, and monumental platforms stretched across the valley of the Upano in Ecuador. For centuries, the Amazon was painted as a blank space, too wild, too poor, too unforgiving to nurture anything but scattered tribes. But what if that story was wrong? What if beneath the endless green canopy there once thrived a true civilization, organized, engineered, and forgotten? In 2024, lasers fired from the sky cut through the jungle and revealed what human eyes could not. Thousands of hidden platforms, entire cities sleeping under the forest floor, a monumental complex that rivals the scale of old-world wonders. The Amazon, long dismissed as untouched wilderness, is suddenly rewriting the story of human history. What if the first great civilization of the Amazon rose not in myth, but in the very soil of Ecuador's Upano Valley? What if it has been waiting patiently for us to find it again? Settle in, let the noise of the day dissolve, and join me as we step into a world erased by silence, yet preserved by the forest itself. Tonight we'll drift into the canopy's secrets, where memory breathes beneath the leaves. At first glance, the Upano Valley of eastern Ecuador is indistinguishable from the vast sweep of Amazonia, rolling hills blanketed in forest, mist clinging to the ridges, rivers meandering like dark veins beneath the canopy. To most eyes, this is wilderness, untouched, timeless, eternal. For centuries, this has been the prevailing myth, that the Amazon was a natural cathedral, too harsh to nurture anything more than scattered villages, too poor in soil to sustain anything resembling cities. The forest seemed to guard its silence, and outsiders assumed that silence meant emptiness. But silence is not absence. In 2024, a team of archaeologists shattered this illusion with a revelation that rippled far beyond the academic world. Using LiDAR, light detection and ranging, lasers fired from aircraft penetrated the dense green veil, stripping away vegetation in digital layers and exposing the ground below. What appeared was staggering. Nearly 6,000 platforms, most rectangular in shape, spread across the valley like a mosaic. They were linked by straight causeways and anchored by at least 15 large settlements, some of them sprawling urban nodes complete with plazas, terraces, and ceremonial complexes. At the heart of it all lay Quilomope, a monumental centre whose scale rivals that of old-world hubs, yet had remained hidden for centuries beneath vines and roots. The finding was published in the journal Science in January 2024 and quickly captured headlines. Lost Amazonian cities found in Ecuador, a forgotten civilization beneath the rainforest. For a world accustomed to imagining the Amazon as pristine wilderness, the shock was profound. Here was proof that 2,500 years ago, between 500 BCE and 600 CE, a complex civilization flourished where most believed none could. This discovery did not emerge from nowhere. For decades, archaeologists and explorers hinted at something more beneath the canopy. Early Spanish chroniclers like Francisco de Orellana described riverbanks lined with villages, fleets of canoes, and fields stretching into the distance. Yet their reports were dismissed as exaggerations, fantasies born of hunger and fever. Later travellers saw only scattered bands of survivors, their numbers already decimated by European diseases, and concluded the earlier accounts must have been false. From that moment onward, the Amazon was enshrined in scholarship as a counterfeit paradise, lush but deceptive, incapable of sustaining dense populations. The Upano Valley has now proven otherwise. Excavations led by Franco-Ecuadorian archaeologist Francisco Valdez reveal cultural layers stretching across centuries. Hearths blackened by ancient fire, grinding stones used for maize and manioc, ceramic vessels decorated with intricate patterns. Each fragment speaks of permanence, not transience. Radiocarbon dating places occupation firmly within the first millennium BCE through the early centuries CE, overlapping with the classical world of Rome and the early kingdoms of Mesoamerica. While legions marched across Europe and Teotihuacan rose in Mexico, people in the Amazon were shaping their own monumental landscape. And the scale of labour was monumental indeed. Imagine thousands of baskets of earth carried day after day to raise platforms that rose above the forest floor. Straight avenues, cut with mathematical precision, stretched for kilometers, defying the undulating terrain. Plazas were cleared broad enough for hundreds to gather, while terraces lined the slopes for farming. The city did not merely exist within the forest. It transformed it, bending the land into order. What is most striking is the difference of medium. In Egypt, stone pyramids thrust against the sky. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats of baked clay towered over floodplains. Here in Upano, earth itself was the building block, moulded into platforms and plazas. In a humid rainforest where wood decays and stone is scarce, soil became the architecture of memory. The fact that these works endured long enough to be revealed millennia later testifies to the sophistication of their builders. Even the ecological puzzle of the Amazon was answered. How could such a place, with notoriously poor soils, sustain large populations? The answer lies in Terra Preta, the engineered black earth scattered across the valley. By enriching the ground with charcoal, broken pottery, and organic matter, the Upano inhabitants created fertile zones capable of supporting intensive agriculture. Without this ecological ingenuity, their cities would have starved. With it, they could thrive for centuries. The implications ripple outward. If such complexity arose in one valley, what other stories lie concealed in the 6.7 million square kilometers of the Amazon basin? Already, sites in Bolivia's Llanos de Mojos reveal vast canal systems and causeways. In Acre, Brazil, enormous geoglyphs emerge where forest has been cleared. Upano is not an isolated miracle, but part of a larger pattern. Its rediscovery forces us to redraw the map of world civilizations, placing the Amazon alongside Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus, not as a copy, but as an equal, different in form, yet comparable in scale. Picture the valley 2,500 years ago. Dawn breaks across terraces blackened with fertile soil. Farmers tend fields of manioc, maize, and cacao, while smoke rises from hearths. Traders walk along causeways carrying pottery, fruits, and tools, their voices mingling with the sound of drums from a plaza where a festival is beginning. Children run across platforms that today lie buried under roots. From the perspective of a bird circling above, the pattern is unmistakable. A city of earth and garden, alive with rhythm. Now picture the same valley today. Mist drapes the hills, and trees rise where plazas once stood. Vines coil over the outlines of terraces. To the untrained eye, there is nothing but forest. Yet beneath every step, the geometry remains, a buried memory waiting for rediscovery. The forest hid a city, not once but for centuries. It concealed the voices of thousands, the ingenuity of soil engineers, the rhythms of ceremonies in plazas now silent. Only with technology, lasers cutting through leaves, have we begun to hear those voices again. And so the opening question returns. What if Amazon's first civilization rose here, in the Upano Valley, 2,500 years ago? What if the story of human achievement has been incomplete all along, blind to the green continent that wrote its history in soil instead of stone? The canopy still whispers. Its silence is not emptiness, but memory, waiting for us to listen. History does not only vanish in the jungle, it can also vanish in the archives of scholarship. The story of Ecuador's Upano Valley is not only about the people who built its platforms 2,000 years ago, but also about the man who first recognized their significance in modern times and was almost entirely ignored. His name was Pedro Porras, a priest, teacher, and archaeologist whose footsteps crossed the valley decades before laser beams revealed its secrets to the world. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Porras walked through the Upano region with little more than a spade, a notebook, and an eye trained to see what others dismissed. He noted earthen mounds rising unnaturally from the forest floor, ceramics scattered in patterns too deliberate to be accidental, and fragments of roads visible as raised lines beneath the undergrowth. His maps outlined plazas, his reports described villages and ceremonial centres, and his conclusions were bold. The Upano Valley had been home to a complex society long before European contact. At the time, these claims clashed with orthodoxy. The Amazon, according to mainstream anthropology, was a counterfeit paradise, an environment too poor in resources to sustain anything beyond small, mobile bands of people. The soil leached nutrients quickly, the climate was unstable, and the forest too overwhelming. The idea of dense settlements was dismissed as fantasy. Against this backdrop, Porras's work was treated with skepticism. His publications, written in Spanish and released in Ecuador, circulated only locally. International scholars who dominated the conversation overlooked them almost entirely. Thus began the second erasure of the Upano Valley. The first was when its cities collapsed and were swallowed by vines. The second was when the man who found them again was swallowed by disbelief. To global academia, Porras's findings might as well not have existed. His careful drawings and maps gathered dust on library shelves, his name absent from the grand debates about pre-Columbian civilizations. There is a haunting irony in this. Porras's discoveries were not minor. He described platforms that matched precisely those later confirmed by LiDAR. He sketched roads that would only decades later be mapped by satellite. He wrote of ceramics in situ, complete with descriptions of their design and distribution, which match current archaeological surveys. Everything the world celebrated in 2024 had, in some form, already been described by Porras nearly half a century earlier. But archaeology is not only about what is found, it is also about who is believed. In an age when Ecuador's voice carried little weight in global discourse, when local scholarship was often overshadowed by institutions in North America and Europe, Porras's testimony was discounted. The forest hid the city once, the world's prejudice hid it again. Imagine him in the field, a solitary figure cutting through the underbrush, sweating in the humid air, pausing before a mound where roots twist over its edges. He kneels, brushing aside soil to reveal a shard of pottery, its surface decorated with faint spirals. He sketches it carefully, not as an isolated fragment, but as part of a pattern. To him, the mound is not a hill, but a platform, the shard not just debris, but a voice from the past. Around him the jungle hums, indifferent to his recognition. Now imagine his return to the academic halls, presenting his findings in reports and lectures. His words, spoken with conviction, meet silence. Colleagues nod politely. Some raise objections, others dismiss the possibility outright. The Amazon cannot support cities, they insist. Your sites are scattered hamlets, nothing more. His vision of a forgotten civilization dissolves into skepticism. He is left to publish his work quietly, knowing that it may not travel beyond his homeland. This cycle of forgetting and remembering is not unique to Porras. Throughout history, voices from the margins have often been silenced when they challenge dominant narratives. Consider Heinrich Schliemann, whose belief in Troy was long ridiculed until he unearthed its ruins. Or Michael Coe's early theories of the Olmec as a mother culture, initially dismissed, now widely accepted. Archaeology is filled with such cases where discoveries wait for the world to catch up, sometimes decades too late. In 2024, when the Science article revealed Upano's urban landscape, Ecuadorian archaeologists were quick to point out that it was not entirely new. They recalled Porras's work, his notebooks, his excavations. Some even bristled at the headlines, which celebrated the discovery as if it had never been glimpsed before. The global spotlight had arrived, but it shone as much on international teams and their technology as on the valley itself. Porras's name appeared only in footnotes, a ghost in the narrative he helped uncover. This raises uncomfortable questions. Why do some discoveries count only when validated by technology or by certain institutions? Why are local voices so easily erased, even when they speak truths confirmed decades later? The Upano Valley teaches us that forgetting is not just an accident, it is often the result of choices about whose knowledge is valued. And yet, there is also resilience in this story. Porras may not have been recognized in his lifetime, but the land vindicated him. Every platform revealed by LiDAR, every plaza mapped in 2024, is a testament to his vision. His overlooked work is now being revisited, his name spoken again in the context of rediscovery. Forgotten, remembered, forgotten again, yet never entirely erased. The silence of the forest and the silence of academia mirror each other. Both conceal, both mislead, both convince us of absence when presence lies just beneath the surface. To look at Upano today is to recognize not only the ingenuity of its ancient builders, but also the persistence of one man who refused to see emptiness where there was design. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson. Civilizations are lost not only because they fall, but because we refuse to believe they ever existed. And sometimes, the rediscovery of the past requires not just lasers and satellites, but humility, the willingness to listen to voices we once ignored. As we move forward, let us carry Porras with us into the story. His footsteps along forest trails remind us that history is fragile, memory selective, and recognition delayed. The forest may breathe slowly, but eventually it exhales the truths it has hidden. Close your eyes and imagine a city. Perhaps you see stone streets, crowded markets, temples towering over narrow lanes. That is the old world model. Athens with its marble, Rome with its forums, Memphis with its pyramids. But in the Upano Valley, civilization followed another blueprint. Here, cities grew like gardens. Archaeologists describe the Upano settlements as an early experiment in what is now called garden urbanism, a form of city building that blended architecture and agriculture so seamlessly that one could not be separated from the other. Unlike the dense walled centres of Mesopotamia or Egypt, Upano was porous, open, threaded with fields, orchards and roads. A platform was not merely a ceremonial mound, it was also a foundation for homes ringed by crops. A plaza was not an isolated square. It was a breathing space connected to the fertility of the land. This design was not an accident. In the humid rainforest, the environment demanded cooperation rather than confrontation. Where other civilizations carved stone to defy nature, the people of Upano cultivated balance. The soil was engineered into Terra Preta, black and fertile. Crops like manioc, maize, and cacao were planted not in fields apart from settlements, but in patches interwoven with neighborhoods. Fruit trees provided shade for pathways. The city itself was alive, its architecture inseparable from ecology. Excavations reveal how deliberate this was. Roads ran straight, sometimes for kilometers, aligning with plazas and causeways. These avenues often linked clusters of platforms to cultivated fields, suggesting that agriculture was planned as part of the urban design. It was not a case of farms surrounding cities, but of farms within cities, their productivity reinforcing the rhythm of social life. The comparison with Cambodia's Angkor is telling. Angkor, at its height between the 9th and 15th centuries, sprawled across more than 1,000 square kilometers. It too was a low-density urban system, where temple complexes, canals, rice paddies, and villages merged into a single landscape. There, water management sustained tens of thousands. In Upano, soil engineering did the same. Two worlds apart, yet the principle was identical. Civilization flourishes not only in stone but in living systems of land and water. Imagine a day in Upano around 300 BCE. At dawn, smoke curls from hearths on raised platforms. Families step down into nearby gardens, planting manioc cuttings into dark, fertile earth. Children run along the edges of plazas, their laughter mingling with the calls of parrots overhead. Traders walk along straight avenues lined with fruit trees, carrying baskets of maize and pottery toward Kilimope's central plaza. By afternoon, the city hums with ritual preparation, drums echoing, dancers painting their faces, shamans preparing chants, and all around fields and gardens breathe with the same rhythm, sustaining the lives that animate the platforms. This integration blurs our categories. Was Upano a city or a farm? The answer is both. It was a living mosaic, each platform a home, each plaza a gathering place, each patch of soil part of a grand ecological design. Civilization here did not mean crowding into walls, but weaving communities into the land itself. The resilience of this system is striking. While Old World civilizations often collapsed when their irrigation canals failed or their soil eroded, Upano's people had engineered longevity by embedding fertility into the very ground. Terra Preta remains productive even today, centuries after its creators vanished. It is as though the land itself remembers the hands that shaped it, and yet the invisibility of this model contributed to its dismissal. For scholars trained to recognize civilization only in pyramids, palaces, or written texts, a city grown like a garden was easy to overlook. The forest reclaimed platforms quickly, covering plazas in vines and roads in roots. What endured, soil, orchards, patterns of fertility, was not recognized as monumental. Only now, with LiDAR exposing geometry and archaeology, uncovering layers of engineered earth, do we see what was always there. The implications ripple outward. If the Upano Valley created such cities 2.5 millennia ago, how many other garden civilizations once thrived in silence? How many networks of soil and road, plaza, and crop are still hidden beneath green shadows? The Amazon may not have hosted one civilization, but many, each growing differently, yet guided by the same principle: to merge human life with the breathing body of the forest. Picture the canopy as it appeared then, not the uninterrupted green we see today, but a quilt. Clearings stitched with orchards, avenues like seams, platforms like embroidery. From the air, it must have looked like a garden designed on a monumental scale, a city not carved against nature but planted within it. This vision challenges how we define civilization itself. If we measure only by stone pyramids and written codes, Upano disappears. But if we measure by organization, innovation, ecological mastery, and cultural life, then the valley was unmistakably urban. Civilization wears many faces, and one of them is the garden city hidden beneath the Amazon's veil. Perhaps this is why the rediscovery resonates so deeply. It does not just show us ruins, it forces us to expand our imagination of what is possible. Civilization is not a single pattern, but a spectrum, from stone temples to living gardens, from deserts to rainforests. Upano was part of that spectrum, a model lost, then remembered, and maybe it holds lessons for us now. In a world searching for sustainable ways to live with the environment, Upano's garden urbanism offers an ancient example. A civilization that thrived not by conquering the forest, but by weaving itself into its fabric. What do you think? Could this hidden model of city building change the way we understand civilization? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if journeys like this spark your curiosity, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next step into the world's forgotten past. The Upano Valley astonishes with its scale. Thousands of platforms, straight avenues, ceremonial plazas, but its true meaning emerges only when seen in context. Across the Amazon basin, traces of other centers rise like faint echoes of the same impulse: to build, to organize, to transform the forest into a canvas of civilization. Upano may be the clearest window we have, but it is not alone. Travel westward into Brazil, to the region known as Kuhikugu, hidden in the headwaters of the Xingu River. Here, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of at least 20 interconnected settlements. Straight causeways stretch between them, some running for miles, their lines still visible beneath the forest floor. Defensive ditches ring certain neighborhoods, suggesting a need for protection or demarcation. Central plazas, circular and precise, formed gathering spaces for ritual or trade. Like Upano, Kuhikugu was not a village, but a system, a constellation of sites woven together by road and ritual. Estimates suggest it may have supported tens of thousands of people, sustained by agriculture and aquaculture. The very scale challenges the myth of an empty forest. Farther south, in the Llanos de Mojos of Bolivia, the builders took a different approach. This vast plain floods seasonally, alternating between swamp and savanna. Rather than abandon it, ancient inhabitants transformed it. They raised thousands of mounds above the floodwaters, shaping them into habitation sites, agricultural platforms, and ceremonial spaces. They dug canals and reservoirs in geometrical patterns, creating a watery lattice across hundreds of square kilometers. Aerial photography reveals the astonishing regularity: long causeways running arrow straight, connecting mound to mound. Circular ponds dotting the plains in deliberate grids. This was not survival by improvisation. It was mastery by design, turning flood into foundation. And in the Brazilian state of Acre, the forest guards yet another layer of memory: geoglyphs, enormous geometric figures carved into the earth. Circles, squares, and interlocking lines stretch across clearings, some more than 300 meters in diameter. Ditches up to 11 meters wide and 4 meters deep outline patterns so precise they could only be intentional. Archaeologists date many of them to 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, overlapping directly with Upano's fluorescence. Their purpose remains debated: ceremonial enclosures, territorial markers, or perhaps symbolic diagrams meant to mirror cosmic order. Whatever their function, they prove that the peoples of Amazonia expressed monumentality not only in platforms and canals, but also in geometry inscribed on the land itself. Seen together, these sites form a mosaic of ingenuity: Upano's monumental platforms, Kuhikugu's networked towns, Mojo's hydrological choreography, Acre's ritual earthworks. Each is unique, yet all share a family resemblance. They speak of societies capable of organizing labor, of planning across landscapes, of embedding meaning in earth. They reveal that Amazonian civilization was not a singular miracle, but a recurring pattern, surfacing in multiple regions, shaped by local environments, yet guided by a common vision: to settle, to thrive, to leave marks that endured. Imagine for a moment what this meant 2,000 years ago. A canoe laden with pottery leaves a settlement near Kuhikugu, its paddlers gliding along a tributary lined with gardens. Downstream they encounter another community, perhaps smaller, but with plazas and earthworks of its own. Far to the west, in the Upano Valley, farmers walk causeways linking their homes to ceremonial centres. To the south, in Mojo's, people plant on raised fields that gleam above the floods, while across Acre, rituals unfold within vast geometric enclosures. Each group lived within its own world, yet across the basin echoes resonated: parallel solutions, parallel dreams. Archaeology hints at these resonances. Pottery styles repeat motifs across vast distances. Similar agricultural strategies, Terra Preta in the north, raised fields in the south, show convergent innovation. Even myths echo one another, with serpent stories curling through multiple cultures, suggesting shared cosmological frameworks. It is as if the Amazon itself encouraged certain patterns, and its inhabitants, separated by hundreds of kilometers, responded with variations on a theme. The realization unsettles long-held assumptions. For generations, scholars dismissed the idea of Amazonian complexity because they looked for pyramids, palaces, or written texts. What they missed was that complexity here wore different clothes: roads of earth rather than stone, networks of canals rather than irrigation ditches, geoglyphs instead of carved monuments. The silence of the forest is deceptive. It hides not absence but abundance expressed in unfamiliar ways. And yet these echoes also remind us of fragility. Unlike Egypt's pyramids or Mesopotamia's ziggurats, built of stone or baked brick, Amazonian monuments were crafted from earth. They endure as shadows, faint outlines beneath trees, vulnerable to erosion and time. Their very medium contributed to their invisibility, an invisibility that only LiDAR, satellites, and the patient work of archaeologists can now undo. Still, the echoes persist. In the straight line of a road glimpsed beneath vines, in a ditch curving perfectly into a circle, in a mound rising subtly above a plain. Each is a syllable in a forgotten language of design scattered across the basin. Upano speaks clearly now, but its voice is not alone. The Amazon is a chorus, and only recently have we begun to hear its harmony. So when we call Upano the first civilization of the Amazon, we must pause. First discovered, yes. First dated, perhaps. But as Kuhikugu, Mojos, and Acre remind us, civilization here was not a solitary spark, but a constellation. The forest hides many stories, and each rediscovery reveals that the Amazon's past is larger, older, and more intricate than we imagined. And if echoes of builders emerge in so many places, what might bind them together? What highway could carry goods, stories, and ideas across such immense distances? To follow that question, we must turn to the rivers, the arteries of Amazonia, its true highways through time. Stand on the bank of the Upano River in the cool light of dawn. Mist curls over the water, parrots scatter in bursts of colour, and the current moves with a quiet power. Today it seems like an isolated stream threading through forested hills, but 2,000 years ago this river was no boundary. It was a road, a living artery binding together settlements, plazas, and fields across the Amazon. For the people of the Upano Valley, rivers were highways without end. Archaeologists note that many platforms and plazas sit close to riverbanks, their causeways leading directly to the water's edge. These were not accidents of placement, they were deliberate connections. From the forest, a road could guide you straight into a canoe, and from the canoe, you could travel for hundreds of kilometers along tributaries that linked valleys together. Rivers made isolation impossible. They created networks. The Spanish chronicler Francisco de Orellana, drifting down the Amazon in 1541, described scenes so vivid that later generations accused him of fantasy. He wrote of villages strung for miles along the river, bridges spanning tributaries, and fleets of canoes moving like armies. He compared some towns to the bustling centres of Spain, their houses arranged in order, their gardens abundant. His account was dismissed for centuries as exaggeration. Yet the rediscovery of Upano, Kuhikugu, and other centres now makes his words sound eerily accurate. What he witnessed may have been the last glimmers of a civilization still clinging to river highways, just before epidemic collapse erased it. To grasp the role of rivers in Amazonian life, one must understand the sheer scale of the basin. The Amazon River and its tributaries form the largest drainage system on Earth, stretching more than 6,400 kilometers from the Andes to the Atlantic, with over 1,100 tributaries, 17 of them major rivers in their own right. For ancient inhabitants, these waterways were as vital as roads and aqueducts were for Rome, or caravan routes for Mesopotamia. In an environment where dense forest made overland travel slow and arduous, rivers offered speed, connectivity, and continuity. Archaeological evidence supports this picture. At Kuhikugu in Brazil, causeways led directly into canals, suggesting a seamless transition from land to water. In Bolivia's Mojos, massive networks of artificial waterways channeled seasonal floods, but also created navigable routes between settlements. In the Upano Valley, the straight roads that cross the landscape often terminate at riverbanks, as though designed to funnel traffic into canoes. Everywhere the pattern repeats. Rivers were not obstacles, but the main roads of civilization. And with rivers came exchange. Obsidian blades from the Andes have been found in Amazonian contexts, proof of long-distance trade. Shells from coastal regions appeared deep inland. Crops such as maize, peanuts, and coca travelled from highlands to lowlands, while manioc and cacao moved outward from Amazonia. Each item was carried not overland through endless forest, but along watery highways, traded village by village, passed downriver until they reached distant valleys. The rivers also carried stories. Myths of giant serpents appear in cultures scattered across the basin, often tied to specific waterways. These legends spread not because they were universal archetypes, but because rivers carried them. A tale told in one village could drift downstream, carried by traders or shamans, and within generations take root hundreds of kilometers away. The river was not only a channel of goods, but also of cosmology, stitching together a shared symbolic world. Imagine the scene: a flotilla of canoes gliding along the Upano at sunset, their paddles dipping in rhythm. The largest canoe carries baskets of maize beer and ceramics painted with spirals. Smaller boats flank it, filled with manioc flour, fruit and fish. Onshore, villagers gather at a landing platform, waiting with their own goods to trade: obsidian blades, woven mats, seeds of sacred plants. As night falls, torches line the banks, guiding the canoes into the plaza, where feast and ceremony begin. This image resonates with patterns found elsewhere. The Nile bound Egypt together through annual floods and a navigable spine. The Euphrates and Tigris tied Mesopotamian cities into trading circuits. The Mississippi served as the artery for Cahokia and its mound complexes. In every case, rivers were more than water. They were civilization itself. the lifelines that allowed human concentration, cooperation, and culture to flourish. The Amazon was no different. Its people did not merely survive in the forest, they thrived by turning rivers into highways. Even today, echoes of this remain. Many Amazonian communities continue to live along waterways, their houses raised on stilts against floods, their canoes pulled up on muddy banks. The river is still the road, the market, the gathering place. Modern archaeologists arriving by boat retrace ancient routes, unknowingly repeating patterns established millennia ago. The rediscovery of Upano forces us to reimagine these ancient highways. They were not scattered channels of wilderness, but part of an integrated system, sustaining tens of thousands of people. Each bend in the river may have concealed a landing, a plaza, a ceremonial mound. Each confluence may have been a hub where stories, goods, and alliances converged. And yet, rivers carry both life and silence. When cities along their banks collapsed, the waterways continued to flow, sweeping away memory. Villages disappeared into vines, canoes rotted into mud, but the rivers endured, their surfaces smooth as if nothing had happened. That is the paradox. The very highways that sustained Amazonian civilization also erased it, carrying its traces into oblivion. Today, when LiDAR reveals roads leading into riverbanks, we begin to see how essential water was to the shape of Amazonian life. The forest may have hidden the platforms, but the rivers, patient, enduring, still trace the roots of memory. And at the center of those roots, one place looms above all: Quilomope, the monumental heart of Upano. If rivers were lifelines, Quilomope was the pulse, a city of earth raised into lasting memory. At the heart of the Upano Valley's rediscovered network lies Quilomope, a monumental center that once commanded the landscape. To the untrained eye today, it appears as little more than a series of low rises under dense vegetation, their outlines blurred by centuries of roots and erosion. But when mapped by LiDAR, Quilomope emerges with startling clarity, a sprawling complex of platforms, plazas, and causeways arranged with precision, as though the valley itself had been sculpted into a city. The scale is astonishing. Some platforms stretch more than 150 meters across, their rectangular outlines cut sharp into the earth. Terraces step down slopes like giant stairways, and broad plazas open like lungs in the middle of the complex. Straight roads radiate outward, connecting Quilomope not only to nearby settlements, but to the wider mosaic of 6,000 platforms across the valley. It is clear that Quilomope was not just another town. It was the ceremonial and political heart of the Upano world, a place where power and ritual converged. Excavations provide glimpses of life here. Hearths litter the platforms, blackened by ancient fires. Shards of pottery, some finely decorated, cluster near plazas, suggesting feasts and communal gatherings. Grinding stones reveal the preparation of maize and manioc on a scale far larger than household subsistence. Food meant for festivals, rituals, or the sustenance of large gatherings. Quilomope was not only a city, it was a stage for collective identity, where thousands could assemble to affirm their place in the cosmos. When the first images of Quilomope's scale were published, comparisons erupted. Journalists quickly dubbed it the Amazonian Giza, pointing out that the site's footprint rivaled that of the plateau where Egypt's pyramids rise. The phrase caught attention, conjuring visions of rainforest pyramids hidden beneath vines. Yet scholars cautioned against the analogy. Unlike Giza's limestone pyramids, Quilomope's platforms were built from earth. In the tropics, earth erodes, collapses, and vanishes under vegetation, leaving only faint traces. Was it fair to compare mud platforms to pyramids of stone? This debate reveals more than just academic caution. It exposes how our imaginations are tethered to stone. Civilizations defined by enduring stone monuments, Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, are privileged as true cradles of civilization. Those who built in earth, wood, or living soil vanish more easily from memory, not because they were less advanced, but because their medium was more vulnerable. Quilomope challenges this bias. Its earthworks required immense labor, engineering, and coordination, just as much as the stone temples of other regions. The difference lies not in ambition, but in ecology. Where stone was scarce, soil was abundant. The builders of Upano turned what they had into something monumental. Imagine the scene 2,000 years ago. You stand on a raised platform overlooking Quilomope's central plaza. Below, hundreds gather. Traders bring baskets of maize, cacao, and pottery. Shamans prepare rituals, their chants rising like smoke. Musicians beat drums, the rhythm echoing off the terraces. At night, torches flicker along causeways, their flames mirrored in the river beyond. From this vantage, the geometry of the city comes alive. The straight roads, the careful alignments, the grand open spaces that transform the valley into theatre. Quilomope may also have served as a political core. Archaeologists note that its centralization suggests coordinated leadership, whether through chiefs, councils, or ritual specialists. The capacity to mobilize labor for such massive earthworks implies systems of authority and belief strong enough to bind thousands of people together. Like the ceremonial centers of Mesoamerica or the mound complexes of North America's Cahokia, Quilomope likely balanced spiritual power with social organization, uniting religion, economy, and politics in a single monumental landscape. Yet because its monuments are made of earth, Quilomope nearly vanished from history. The jungle reabsorbed its walls, vines cloaked its plazas, rains softened its outlines. For centuries, outsiders walking the valley saw only forest. Only technology, LiDAR's laser pulses cutting through leaves, restored its true shape. And so the irony emerges. A center that once drew thousands together disappeared so thoroughly that it required machines flying miles overhead to reveal it again. The rediscovery sparks broader questions. How many other Quilomopes lie hidden in the Amazon? If one valley can contain a city of this scale, what might Bolivia's Mojo's Plains, Brazil's Acre, or Peru's floodplains still conceal? Quilomope forces us to reconsider Amazonia not as fringe, but as core, not as peripheral, but as central to human history. But the debate also continues. Some scholars insist we should resist calling Quilomope a city, arguing that its dispersed garden urbanism does not fit old-world definitions. Others counter that such hesitation reflects bias, privileging familiar models of stone and writing over alternative forms of complexity. In this tension lies the central revelation of Quilomope, that civilization wears many faces. To recognize only the stone ones is to miss half of humanity's story. Quilomope stands as testament that the Amazon was once monumental. Its stones, or rather its soils, speak of a people who shaped the earth into memory. Its plazas whisper of feasts, chants, and rituals long gone. Its causeways remind us that order was imposed upon chaos, geometry upon jungle. Though silent now, Quilomope endures as both question and answer, a reminder that monuments need not pierce the sky to be profound. They need only endure long enough to remind us of what was lost. And as monumental as Quilomope was, its power was not measured only in platforms and plazas. Around it, rivers wound like serpents, carrying myths that gave meaning to the land. To understand the soul of Amazonian civilization, we must follow those stories. Legends of giant serpents coiled in rivers and time, guardians of both destruction and renewal. Across the Amazon, the landscape itself seems alive with myth. Rivers twist and coil like living beings, thunder rolls across the canopy with a force that feels personal, and the forest shelters creatures so large that they invite the imagination of gods. In this world, it is no surprise that serpents, immense, powerful, and eternal, became central figures in myth. They were more than animals. They were the embodiment of the forces that shaped life, death, and renewal. Among the Dasana people of Colombia, the universe was born from the cosmic anaconda. Its enormous body stretched across the void, and from its skin the stars were patterned into the night sky. The Dasana say that the Milky Way itself is the path of this serpent, guiding the balance between worlds. To live was to dwell within the body of the snake, to walk upon its patterned skin. The serpent was not only origin but structure, the axis of creation itself. Along the Napo River in Ecuador and Peru, stories tell of Yakumama, the mother of waters. She is said to dwell at the mouths of rivers and lakes, so vast that she can swallow a canoe whole. When she surfaces, whirlpools form, dragging boats into the depths. Fishermen still speak of her as both protector and destroyer. Offerings must be made, songs sung, or her wrath may claim lives. In her, the danger of the river is personified. The same waters that provide food and transport can also take everything away. In other traditions, serpents embody cycles of time. Some Amazonian groups tell of great snakes that move through ages, their coiling bodies marking the shifts between world eras. Floods, droughts, and cataclysms are interpreted as the serpent shedding its skin, a violent transformation that makes way for renewal. These myths align closely with what archaeologists now see in pollen records and climate data: periods of upheaval, depopulation, and regrowth. Myth and environment, story and soil, mirror each other. Archaeological finds suggest that serpent imagery was woven into daily life. Ceramics unearthed in the Upano Valley bear spiral motifs, repeating coils that may represent snakes or cosmic cycles. The same motifs appear elsewhere in the Amazon, on gourds, body paint, and woven textiles. To mark a vessel with spirals was to inscribe it with meaning, perhaps invoking the serpent's fertility or acknowledging its power to renew and destroy. A pot was never just a pot, it was a canvas for myth. Imagine standing in Quilamopi's plaza during a night ceremony. Fires burn in rings around the open space, their light dancing on the walls of earthen platforms. Drummers beat a steady rhythm, while shamans painted with serpent patterns chant into the darkness. The songs call on Yakumama to keep the rivers abundant and safe, to protect the harvest. In the chants, the serpent is not only myth but necessity, an acknowledgement that survival depends on respecting forces larger than oneself. Serpents are not unique to the Amazon. Across cultures, they slither through cosmologies as universal symbols. In Mesopotamia, the goddess Tiamat, a chaos dragon, embodied the primal sea before creation. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl was both culture hero and bringer of knowledge. In India, the Nagas are divine serpent beings associated with rivers and fertility, protectors of treasures and gateways to hidden realms. In each case, serpents are liminal beings, creatures of thresholds, bridging water and land, life and death, chaos and order. The Amazonian serpent myths fit seamlessly into this global chorus, yet they are distinct in how they echo the ecology of the basin. Where rivers curve like coils, serpents inhabit them. Where floods come suddenly and devastate, serpents are blamed. Where fertility returns after destruction, serpents are celebrated. The myths are ecological memory, encoded in story, so that generations could remember how to live with a landscape that was both gift and threat. Modern biologists note that these myths are not mere invention. The Amazon is home to the green anaconda, the largest snake in the world, capable of reaching over 8 meters in length and weighing more than 200 kilograms. To encounter such a creature in the water, silent, powerful, capable of dragging prey beneath the surface, is to confront living myth. Yakumama is not just imagination, she is an amplification of reality. But myths also serve social functions. By embedding respect and fear of the river into stories of serpents, communities reinforced sustainable behaviours. Fishermen knew where not to venture. Children were taught caution. Rituals ensured that human activity acknowledged ecological limits. Myth was a form of governance, shaping human action without written law. The legends of serpents in the Upano Valley remind us that civilization is not measured only in platforms and plazas. It is also measured in the stories that knit communities together, the symbols painted on vessels, the chants that echoed in plazas. The serpent was as much a monument as Quilamopi's platforms, an invisible monument living in words, rituals, and memory. And perhaps that is the deeper truth. Where stone civilizations left pyramids to endure in silence, the peoples of Amazonia left myths to endure in voices. One erodes slowly, the other reshapes itself across generations, always changing, yet always returning. Like the serpent shedding its skin, the myth survives by transforming. From the body of the serpent, we move to the body of the earth itself. If myth preserved memory in story, then soil preserved memory in matter. Beneath the forest floor lies another monument, invisible yet enduring. the black earth known as Terra Preta, engineered by human hands to sustain life across centuries. Civilizations leave behind monuments of stone and metal, but in the Amazon, one of the most enduring legacies is something far humbler: soil. The rainforest's natural ground is famously poor, its thin layer of nutrients washed away by torrential rains. Outsiders once saw this as proof that the Amazon could never sustain cities. But scattered across the basin, archaeologists and farmers encounter patches of earth unlike any other: dark, fertile, resilient. This is Terra Preta, the Black Earth, and it is perhaps the greatest monument of Amazonian ingenuity. Unlike the pale acidic soils around it, Terra Preta is rich in carbon and nutrients. It retains fertility for centuries, even millennia, supporting crops harvest after harvest. Scientists have long debated its origin, but the evidence is clear. Terra Preta was made, not found. Ancient Amazonians enriched the land deliberately, mixing charcoal, fish bones, broken pottery, food scraps, and plant matter into the ground. Slowly, over generations, barren soil was transformed into living memory. The scale of this achievement is staggering. Studies suggest that millions of hectares across the Amazon contain Terra Preta. Some patches are small, the size of household gardens. Others stretch for kilometers, forming belts of fertility where ancient communities once clustered. In some places, the soil remains so fertile that modern farmers prize it above all others, planting cassava, maize, and fruit trees as if they were cultivating the legacy of forgotten ancestors. Radiocarbon dating reveals that some Terra Preta deposits are more than 4,500 years old, long before the platforms of Upano were built. This means the technology of Black Earth was not an accident of a single culture, but a deep tradition, passed through generations and across regions. By the time Kilamopi and the Upano settlements thrived, they inherited a technology already tested by centuries of use. Their plazas and roads were sustained by fields of black soil, invisible infrastructure that made urban life possible. Imagine standing in an Upano garden around 200 CE. A family kneels in a field, turning the earth with wooden tools. Children scatter broken potsherds into the soil, laughing as they work. Women burn plant matter in controlled fires, spreading the charcoal into neat rows. Over time, the field darkens, not with ash alone, but with transformation. Crops take root, maize stalks rise tall, cassava tubers grow thick, fruit trees shade the edge of the clearing. Generations later, archaeologists dig into the same ground and find it still fertile, still alive with the memory of human hands. Modern science confirms the genius of this ancient method. Terra Preta contains microscopic organisms that recycle nutrients, maintaining fertility even after centuries of use. It acts like a sponge, holding water in times of drought and resisting leaching during floods. Today, soil scientists study it as a potential solution to modern agriculture's challenges: how to sustain crops without exhausting the earth. In this way, the forgotten builders of the Amazon may yet teach us how to farm the future. But Terra Preta is more than a technical feat, it is also a cultural one. To create it required collective labour, shared knowledge, and long-term vision. Communities had to understand that fertility could be engineered, that waste could become resource, that land could be improved over time. This worldview stands in contrast to the notion of wilderness as something untouched. The Amazon was not untouched. It was carefully, deliberately cultivated. Archaeologists now argue that the pristine forest celebrated by early naturalists is, in part, an illusion. Many regions of high biodiversity coincide with areas of Terra Preta, suggesting that human activity enhanced, rather than diminished, the richness of the rainforest. Orchards of Brazil nut trees, groves of palm, and clusters of medicinal plants often grow in places where ancient hands once tended the soil. What we call wilderness may, in fact, be the afterimage of a garden. Picture the valley of Upano when its fields were alive. From above, the forest opens into patches of dark earth, their edges lined with manioc and maize. Families move between platforms and gardens, baskets on their shoulders, laughter carrying across the clearings. The city breathes with the rhythm of cultivation: plant, harvest, feast, renew. The soil itself becomes the infrastructure of society, as enduring as any pyramid or palace. And yet, like the platforms and plazas, Terra Preta too was swallowed by silence. When populations collapsed, whether from climate shifts, disease, or other causes, fields lay fallow. The forest reclaimed them, vines weaving over old gardens, trees rooting in black soil. To outsiders, nothing seemed extraordinary. Only when spades dug into the earth did the truth emerge. The soil was different, its fertility unnatural, its memory long. Terra Preta reframes the Amazonian story. It shows that complexity here was not expressed only in monuments above ground, but also in the invisible architecture beneath our feet. It is both ecological engineering and cultural legacy, a monument written in matter itself. To dismiss it is to miss the ingenuity of a civilization that understood how to make the land live forever. And so we must ask, if the builders of Upano could transform barren ground into fertile gardens that still endure, what other secrets of sustainability did they know? What lessons have we forgotten, hidden under centuries of disbelief? The soil waits with its answer. What do you think? Could the black earth of the Amazon hold lessons for how we live with the land today? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this journey into hidden civilizations intrigues you, consider subscribing to join the next step into history's shadows. When civilizations fall, they usually leave behind scars. The shattered columns of Greece, the toppled statues of Mesopotamia, the crumbling temples of the Maya, ruins that speak loudly of endings. But in the Amazon, collapse takes another form. Here, ruins are not broken but erased. The jungle does not leave fragments exposed to the sky. It enfolds them, swallowing them whole until silence convinces the world that nothing was ever there. The Upano Valley, once alive with platforms, plazas and causeways, eventually succumbed to this green silence. By around 600 CE, its monumental earthworks had been abandoned. Within seasons, vines crept across terraces. Within decades, trees rooted in plazas. Within centuries, the forest canopy closed so completely that memory itself dissolved. For more than 1,000 years, the city of Earth lay buried beneath roots, as if the land had exhaled and reclaimed what had been borrowed. Why did this happen? Archaeology offers possibilities, but no single answer. One explanation lies in climate change. Pollen cores from nearby lakes show abrupt transitions during the first millennium CE. Shifts in rainfall patterns that alternated between intense droughts and catastrophic floods. A civilization that depended on the careful rhythm of rivers, on gardens woven into seasonal cycles, would have been vulnerable. A prolonged drought could have withered crops, while floods could have swept away entire fields. When the environment shifted beyond their control, the delicate balance sustaining Upano may have collapsed. Another possibility is disease. Long before Europeans carried smallpox and measles across the ocean, the Amazon harboured its own pathogens. Some researchers point to hantavirus, carried by rodents, capable of erupting suddenly and killing even the healthiest adults. In tightly knit communities, with crowded plazas and shared feasts, such outbreaks could have spread quickly, unravelling the social fabric. Later, after European contact, epidemic waves amplified the devastation. By the time chroniclers like Orellana descended the river in 1541, vast stretches of the basin had already been depopulated by invisible enemies. There is also the possibility of internal fracture. Civilizations thrive on cooperation, but they are not immune to conflict. As populations grew, disputes over land, water, or leadership may have intensified. Some archaeologists suggest that the defensive ditches seen at Kuhikugu hint at warfare or raiding among Amazonian groups. Perhaps Upano, too, faced pressures from within, factional rivalries, ritual disputes, or social stresses that eventually caused people to drift away. Collapse may not have been sudden but gradual, a thinning of ties until the networks unravelled. What is striking, however, is the quietness of this ending. There is no evidence of burning cities, no layers of ash or mass graves. Excavations reveal abandonment rather than catastrophe. Plazas left empty, hearths no longer lit, ceramics broken only by time. This is collapse as absence, not destruction. The jungle became both shroud and eraser, covering the memory so thoroughly that later scholars could not believe it ever existed. Picture the last days of Kilamopi. A festival once filled the plaza, but now only a few families gather. Drums echo faintly where once they thundered. Traders no longer arrive in flotillas. The causeways are overgrown. Ritual fires burn lower each year, until one night they are extinguished entirely. Families leave along the river, searching for safer ground. The plaza falls silent. Soon the rains return, vines creep over the platforms, and the forest breathes the city back into itself. This silence deceived generations. When explorers and naturalists entered the Amazon centuries later, they saw only wilderness. The canopy stretched unbroken, the soil appeared thin and poor, the villages they met were small. To them, the absence of ruins meant an absence of civilization. They did not realize that the forest itself was the ruin, its abundance concealing centuries of human shaping. Yet traces of collapse remain in the environment. Pollen records show sudden declines in cultivated plants like maize and manioc, replaced by forest species. Layers of charcoal suggest fields once burned for agriculture were abandoned, fires no longer lit to clear land. In their place, secondary growth surged, filling the vacuum left by human retreat. What scientists once interpreted as untouched rainforest was, in fact, regrowth after depopulation. The pattern is familiar when compared globally. Around the same centuries, other civilizations faced upheaval. The Maya experienced cycles of abandonment tied to drought. Teotihuacan in central Mexico declined after social unrest. Rome itself faltered under pressure. Collapse is rarely a single event. It is a process, a series of fractures compounded until societies dissolve. The Amazon fits this pattern, though its traces are subtler, its ruins less visible. What makes the Amazon unique is how thoroughly the forest heals. In Egypt, the desert preserved pyramids for millennia. In Mesopotamia, arid soil held the outlines of ziggurats. In the Amazon, life erases death. The same fertility that made cities possible also ensured their disappearance. To walk through the Upano Valley today is to see only trees, yet beneath every root lies geometry, every clearing a plaza waiting to be recognized. The green silence is not emptiness. It is memory folded into nature, a kind of living archive. The collapse of Upano did not obliterate its legacy. It transformed it, embedding it in soil, myth, and forest. To rediscover it is to listen carefully to silence and recognize that even absence speaks. And so we must ask, how many other cities have dissolved in this way, hidden not by destruction but by abundance? How many valleys still cloaked in forest carry the same quiet geometry beneath their roots? The forest hides the answers, just as it once hid Upano. To move forward, we must accept that silence itself can be a monument, a reminder of lives once lived, of civilizations that thrived and vanished without leaving broken stones, only the hush of vines reclaiming plazas. When LiDAR first revealed the hidden cityscapes of the Upano Valley, archaeologists spoke of them as a mosaic. The word was carefully chosen. A mosaic is made of thousands of pieces, each small on its own, but together forming a grand design. And that is precisely what the Upano Valley was. A monumental tapestry of platforms, plazas, and roads stitched into the earth over centuries. The raw numbers are extraordinary. Nearly 6,000 platforms spread across the valley, ranging in size from modest foundations a few meters across to massive constructions large enough to support communal halls. At least 15 interconnected settlements have been identified so far, each with its own plazas and causeways, all bound together into a single network. If one walked from Kilamopi at the center out toward the fringes, one would pass through a rhythm of platforms and roads, like stepping through tiles in a vast pattern. Some platforms were rectangular, aligned carefully with cardinal directions. Others formed clusters, perhaps representing neighborhoods or kinship groups. The largest plazas were wide enough to hold hundreds of people at once, open spaces for ritual, feasting, or markets. Their scale suggests gatherings not just of a single settlement, but of entire regional communities. In these plazas, the mosaic came alive, each platform like a note in a greater symphony of society. The labour required to build this system was immense. Every platform was raised basket by basket, soil carried by hand, reshaped into geometry. To construct 6,000 such structures was not the work of a few seasons, but of generations. The mosaic was a living project, expanding and evolving as communities grew, linking new plazas into the network, repairing causeways, and renewing plazas through repeated ceremonies. The pattern was not static, it pulsed with life, changing with time while retaining its overall order. Archaeologist Stephen Rostaine, one of the leading researchers on the site, describes Upano as a network of garden cities. The phrase captures the essence. This was not urbanism defined by stone walls and palaces, but by integration with agriculture. Around the platforms and plazas, fields of maize and manioc thrived in Terra Preta. Orchards of palms and fruit trees lined roads. Roads themselves often doubled as levees or channels, shaping water flow during rains. The mosaic was ecological as well as social, binding community to environment. To imagine this landscape, think of a quilt stretched across the valley. Each platform is a patch, each causeway a seam, each plaza a space where patterns converge. From the ground one might see only fragments, the plaza of a local settlement, the fields ringing it. But from above, the design is unmistakable. Only now, with airborne lasers cutting through the canopy, can we begin to see what the builders themselves saw. A valley patterned deliberately, a civilization written in earth. The Upano mosaic also resonates with other ancient landscapes. In North America, the great mound complexes of Cahokia sprawled across the Mississippi floodplain, earthen pyramids aligned with plazas and causeways. In Southeast Asia, the city of Angkor created a watery lattice of temples and rice paddies visible only from above. The mosaic of Upano belongs in this company, different in material but similar in vision, to transform land into a canvas of order, visible at human scale and cosmic scale alike. Evidence suggests that some platforms may have had astronomical alignments. Certain causeways run in orientations that match solstices or equinoxes, hinting at a deeper layer of symbolism. If true, then the mosaic was not only practical but cosmological, a map of the sky inscribed on the ground, binding community to the rhythm of the heavens. Such alignments are common in other civilizations. Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, Chaco Canyon, and their presence in Upano would place it firmly in a global tradition of sky-ground architecture. Daily life unfolded within this pattern. A family lived on a modest platform, their house raised above the damp soil. From their doorway, they could walk along a straight road to a plaza, where ceremonies echoed with drums. Traders from distant settlements arrived along causeways, bringing obsidian, shells, and food. Children played on open terraces, their footsteps wearing grooves into the soil. Every act, however ordinary, was framed by the geometry of the mosaic, the invisible order shaping daily experience. Over time, the mosaic expanded. Archaeologists see phases of construction, where new platforms were added, old ones rebuilt, and plazas reshaped. Some settlements may have waxed while others waned, but the network endured for centuries. This resilience speaks of a civilization that was not a brief experiment, but a sustained system, an urban fabric woven and rewoven by generations. The rediscovery of the Upano mosaic reframes how we think about the Amazon. It was not scattered tribes drifting through wilderness, but organized societies building monumental landscapes. Its invisibility until now reflects not its insignificance, but our blindness. We were looking for stone when the monument was soil. We were looking for ruins above ground when the ruins lay beneath roots. Imagine flying over the valley in 2024 as the LiDAR beams reveal hidden geometry. At first, the screen shows only forest, then the software strips the vegetation and lines emerge, straight roads, rectangles, clusters. The archaeologists gasp, recognizing what they are seeing: a valley transformed by human hands into a cityscape hidden in plain sight. In that moment, the silence of centuries is broken, the mosaic seen once more. And yet, mosaics can shatter. When populations collapsed, the pattern dissolved, causeways overtaken by vines, plazas turned to thickets. The geometry did not vanish, it only grew faint, waiting to be revealed again. In rediscovering it, we are piecing together not just platforms but memory, fragments of a civilization that spoke through Earth. The Upano mosaic is more than archaeology. It is a reminder that human imagination has always been broader than we allow. Civilizations do not all look the same. Some carve stone, others inscribe soil. Some write in glyphs, others in spirals painted on clay. The builders of Upano chose to shape their world as a mosaic, a pattern visible in earth and memory. And so, the valley teaches us that civilization is not only about monuments that endure, but about patterns that breathe, fade, and return. The mosaic is alive again, not in the footsteps of its builders, but in the eyes of those who rediscover it. Even when the forest conceals platforms and canals, another archive remains, written not in soil, but in blood. In the past decade, geneticists have sequenced ancient remains and modern populations across South America, uncovering lineages that do not match any known culture. They call these vanished lineages ghost populations, peoples who lived, thrived, and disappeared, leaving no monuments we can identify, only whispers in DNA. In 2015, a landmark study by Skoglund and colleagues revealed something astonishing. Traces of ancestry in some Amazonian groups linked distantly to populations in Australasia, thousands of miles away across the Pacific. Later studies in 2020 and 2021 confirmed faint signals of this Australasian DNA in tribes of the Amazon basin. How could this be? Did an ancient migration once cross unknown routes into the Americas, leaving descendants whose cultures later vanished? Or do these ghost traces reflect a population yet undiscovered, one that contributed to the genetic mosaic of South America before fading into silence? For the story of Upano, the implications are profound. If genetic echoes of unknown peoples linger in the blood of Amazonian descendants, then the builders of the valley's platforms may not have been a singular society, but a tapestry woven from multiple threads. The city could have been a crossroads where distant lineages mingled, peoples carrying forgotten histories converging in one fertile valley. DNA also reveals timelines. Some ghost lineages entered the continent long before 500 BCE, suggesting that by the time Upano flourished, its inhabitants carried memories far older than their visible architecture. Civilizations rise and fall, but ancestry endures, binding the present to an unseen past. Imagine standing in Quilomope's plaza 2,000 years ago. Around you are farmers, artisans, shamans, children, all speaking languages we cannot reconstruct, all carrying genes from ancestors whose names we will never know. Their bodies were living archives containing histories of journeys and migrations as vast as the rivers themselves. When their cities faded, the DNA remained, passing silently through generations until scientists decoded its hidden messages. The genome tells us what ruins cannot, that the Amazon was never a blank canvas, but always a palimpsest of peoples, converging, mingling, vanishing. To walk through the Upano Valley today is to tread on layers of ancestry both visible and invisible. If blood carries such ghosts, then chronicles may too. Centuries after Upano fell silent, an explorer on the Great River claimed to see cities with his own eyes, accounts dismissed as fantasy, yet now echoing with newfound credibility. In the year 1541, the Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana embarked on a desperate journey down a river no European had ever fully mapped. He and his men were starving, sick, and lost in the immensity of the Amazon. Yet as their canoes drifted with the current, what they saw astonished them. Far from wilderness, the riverbanks were lined with villages and towns, each so close to the next that smoke from one hearth merged with the next on the horizon. Orellana described fleets of canoes large enough to rival European ships manned with warriors who moved in disciplined ranks. He reported fields of maize and cassava stretching inland, women weaving textiles, markets bustling with trade. Some towns, he claimed, were as large as Seville, Spain's great port city. In his account, the Amazon was not an empty forest, but a continuous corridor of civilization. When his chronicle reached Europe, it was received with fascination and suspicion. The idea that cities flourished in the world's greatest jungle clashed with the dominant image of the Amazon as savage and uninhabitable. Later explorers, arriving after epidemic diseases had already ravaged the basin, found only scattered small communities. They declared Orellana's stories false, the fantasies of a desperate man half mad from hunger. For centuries, his account was dismissed as exaggeration, a cautionary tale about unreliable explorers. But archaeology now suggests that Orellana may have been telling the truth. The rediscovery of Upano's platforms, the networks of Kuhikugu, the engineered plains of Mojos, and the geometric earthworks of Acre all align eerily with his descriptions. Straight causeways leading to riverbanks, plazas large enough for feasts, and cultivated fields fed by Terra Preta match his vision of a densely populated, organized landscape. The continuity of villages along the river, which he described as almost unbroken, now seems plausible when viewed through LiDAR scans that reveal settlement after settlement hidden beneath trees. To imagine what Orellana saw, picture the Amazon at twilight. Canoes glide silently over the water, torches flickering on their bows. Onshore, platforms rise from the earth, houses clustered around broad plazas where drums and chants echo. Smoke from hearths curls upward, signalling the presence of hundreds, even thousands living along the banks. Traders prepare to exchange ceramics, cacao, and woven mats. Children splash in the shallows, while elders tell stories of serpents coiled beneath the river's skin. This was not wilderness. It was a world alive with culture. Orellana's testimony gained credibility when he described bridges spanning tributaries and roads leading inland, features archaeologists have since documented. He spoke of armies of women warriors who fought fiercely against his men, an account that later inspired the very name Amazon, drawn from the mythic female fighters of Greek lore. While historians debated whether he truly encountered such groups, his detail suggests he was witnessing organized resistance, the defense of riverine settlements that were far from primitive. The tragedy is that Orellana's journey came at the cusp of catastrophe. By the mid-1500s, European diseases had already swept ahead of explorers, carried by trade routes and indirect contact. Smallpox, influenza, and measles devastated populations who had no immunity. By some estimates, up to 90% of Amazonian inhabitants perished within a century of first contact. The great towns Orellana described may already have been weakened, their numbers dwindling. Within decades, plazas stood empty, canoes rotted on the shore, and vines closed over causeways. When later explorers arrived, the silence was so complete that they believed no cities had ever existed. The dismissal of Orellana shaped centuries of scholarship. Naturalists in the 18th and 19th centuries praised the Amazon as a pristine wilderness, a paradise untouched by human hands. This image fit colonial and scientific narratives, but it was based on absence, an absence produced by epidemic collapse, not by eternal emptiness. Orellana's voice was drowned in skepticism, his observations treated as unreliable. The forest had erased not only the cities, but also the credibility of the man who had glimpsed them. Now, in the 21st century, his words are being reread with new eyes. LiDAR reveals what he could not prove, that the riverbanks once held dense settlements, linked by causeways and sustained by engineered soils. His descriptions of abundance, fields, plazas, bridges, fleets resonate with archaeological evidence scattered across the basin. What once sounded like fantasy now sounds like memory. Orellana is not the only one whose accounts deserve re-examination. Missionaries in the 17th century also reported complex societies along the Amazon, describing ritual centres and roads. Their writings, too, were largely dismissed. Together, These testimonies suggest that outsiders repeatedly glimpsed Amazonian civilizations in their twilight, but disbelief and disease consigned them to silence. The story of Orellana underscores a recurring theme. The Amazon is remembered, forgotten, and rediscovered in cycles. The forest hides, scholars dismiss, and only later does technology or persistence restore the truth. Orellana's chronicle now stands beside Pedro Porras' notebooks as part of this paradox, evidence overlooked because it arrived before the world was ready to believe. Picture him on the river, gaunt and exhausted, writing by torchlight in a canoe. His companions mutter in disbelief, some too ill to care, yet he insists on recording what he sees. Cities of earth and water, alive with people, rituals, and abundance. His pen scratches against parchment, leaving behind testimony that would outlive him, waiting centuries for vindication. The echoes of Orellana's words remind us that memory does not always reside in stone or soil. Sometimes it lingers in chronicles, fragile as paper, waiting for the right moment to be believed. And if explorers could misremember or be doubted, perhaps artifacts themselves speak more directly. In the shards of pottery scattered across the Upano Valley, in spirals etched into clay, we may find another kind of testimony, symbols left behind, fragments of a language long lost to silence. Civilizations do not always speak through stone monuments or carved inscriptions. Sometimes their voices survive in humbler forms, on pots, bowls, and shards of clay. In the Upano Valley, where platforms and plazas once thrived with ceremony and trade, archaeologists find thousands of ceramic fragments scattered across the soil. Each shard is a fragment of memory, decorated with spirals, coils, and geometric patterns that hint at meaning far beyond mere utility. Together, they whisper the intellectual life of a people who left no written script, but who nevertheless found ways to encode their world. Excavations at sites like Quillamope and Huapula have uncovered vessels ranging from simple cooking pots to finely crafted ceremonial jars. Many bear intricate designs, repeated motifs of spirals, zigzags, cross-hatching, and interlocking lines. Some seem purely decorative, but others reveal striking regularity, as if following a set of rules. Were these symbols ornamental, or were they part of a symbolic system, a proto-writing, a code of identity, myth, or cosmology? The parallels across Amazonia strengthen the mystery. On Marajo Island, far to the northeast at the mouth of the river, the Marajoara culture flourished between 400 and 1400 CE. Their ceramics are among the most elaborate in the Americas. Bowls painted in red and black, urns shaped like birds and serpents, vessels carved with human faces stylized into abstraction. Some scholars argue these designs represented mythic narratives, others that they carried clan symbols or ritual instructions. When placed beside Upano's spirals, the suggestion emerges that Amazonian peoples shared a tradition of encoding meaning in clay, a language not of words, but of images. Imagine a potter at work in the Upano Valley 2,000 years ago. She kneels beside a platform, smoothing wet clay into shape. With a sharp tool, she carves a spiral into the surface, echoing the coils of a serpent, the curves of the river, or perhaps the cycles of time itself. She adds cross-hatched lines that recall woven mats, or zigzags that mirror lightning across the sky. To the untrained eye, these are decorations. To her community, they may be prayers, identities, or stories. Once fired, the pot is filled with maize beer and carried to a plaza for feasting. When it breaks, its shards scatter into soil, waiting millennia to be unearthed. Symbols in clay also speak of abstraction, the ability to represent ideas rather than objects. This is one of the hallmarks of complex thought, found in early writing systems across the world. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets bore cuneiform. In Egypt, papyrus carried hieroglyphs. In the Amazon, clay vessels may have carried the same role, not as texts in our sense, but as carriers of encoded knowledge. Each motif could stand for a myth, a lineage, a ritual cycle, or even an astronomical event. Indeed, some archaeologists speculate that spiral and concentric circle motifs may have had cosmological significance. Similar designs in other cultures often represent the sun, the moon, or the passage of time. Could Upano's ceramics have functioned as cosmic diagrams, reminders of the rhythms that governed both nature and society? It is tempting to imagine shamans using such vessels in ceremonies, their patterns serving as visual aids in chants or rituals that linked the community to celestial cycles. The use of ceramics as symbolic media is not unique to the Amazon. In the Andes, the Nazca culture painted pottery with stylized figures of animals, plants, and supernatural beings, their abstracted forms echoing the vast geoglyphs etched into desert plains. In Mesoamerica, the Maya painted codex-style vessels with glyphs and scenes from mythology. Even in North America, the Mimbres culture of the Southwest created bowls painted with black and white designs, many of them abstract, others depicting animals and rituals. In each case, clay was not simply practical, it was communicative. Symbols also played a role in social identity. Certain designs may have marked clan affiliation, ritual membership, or geographic origin. A pot bearing one motif could signal belonging to a community miles away, recognized instantly by others. In this way, ceramics became passports of identity, their patterns transmitting information across networks of trade and ritual exchange. Imagine a great feast in Quilomopi's plaza. Dozens of vessels are brought forth, each decorated with motifs specific to its maker. As they are filled with maize beer, participants note the designs: a spiral from one clan, a serpent coil from another, cross-hatching from yet another. The gathering is not only about food and drink, but about recognition, a reaffirmation of bonds expressed in clay. The vessels themselves participate in the ritual, carrying meaning as surely as the chants of shamans. Over centuries, these symbols accumulated into a silent archive. When the civilization of Upano collapsed, its plazas fell silent, but the shards endured. Buried beneath soil and roots, they preserved fragments of the intellectual life of the valley. To archaeologists today, they pose questions that words cannot answer. What did the spirals mean? Were the zigzags prayers for rain, depictions of rivers, or abstract signs of lineage? Did the concentric circles mark astronomical events, or were they metaphors for cycles of life and death? We may never fully decode them. Yet even without translation, the presence of symbols tells us something profound. The people of Upano were not only builders and farmers, but thinkers and artists. They sought to leave marks that outlasted them, to embed meaning into matter. Their civilization was not mute, it spoke in the language of clay. This challenges us to broaden our definition of writing and memory. Civilization is not only measured by stone inscriptions or papyrus scrolls. It can also be measured by abstraction, by the urge to record, to symbolize, to encode thought in durable form. The Upano Valley, with its thousands of ceramic fragments, belongs in this wider story of human expression. Symbols in clay remind us that silence is not emptiness. Even when words are lost, meaning survives in lines, curves, and motifs. The Upano Valley may not have left us texts, but it left us spirals that still coil with mystery, zigzags that still spark imagination, circles that still echo the rhythms of time. And if symbols in clay preserve cycles of meaning, perhaps the next memory lies in cycles of water and catastrophe, in the floods that reset time, remembered not only in myth, but also in the sediments beneath the forest floor. Across the Amazon basin, myths flow like the rivers themselves, long, winding, carrying fragments of memory. Again and again, these stories return to the same image: water rising without warning, swallowing villages, scattering survivors, reshaping the world. For the people of the forest, floods were not just natural events. They were cosmic resets, moments when time itself broke open and began again. Among the Tucanoan peoples of the northwest Amazon, an ancestral flood once swept across the land so suddenly that only those who clung to the branches of a sacred tree survived. In the stories, the tree itself bent beneath the weight of humanity, straining to hold them as the waters surged. When the flood receded, those who had clung to its branches became the founders of new clans, each lineage tied to survival in that cataclysm. In Arawakan traditions, another flood is remembered as punishment sent by spirit beings for human arrogance. Only a handful escaped in canoes, guided by ancestral heroes who led them to new lands. These survivors carried with them not only seeds and tools, but the stories themselves, so that future generations would not forget the lesson. Floods will come again, and only respect for cosmic order ensures survival. Such myths are not isolated tales. They echo across continents. The Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia tells of a deluge sent by the gods, erasing humanity until a chosen survivor built a boat. The Bible's Noah retells the same archetype, as do Hindu stories of Manu, who survives a flood with the help of a divine fish. In the Andes, the creator god Viracocha unleashed waters that drowned early peoples, sparing only a few to repopulate the world. That the Amazon shares this motif suggests not coincidence, but a universal recognition. Water is both giver and taker of life, capable of erasing entire worlds. Archaeology supports the idea that these myths encode real memories of upheaval. Sediment cores taken from lakes and floodplains in the Amazon show abrupt transitions in vegetation. Layers rich in crop pollen, maize, manioc, squash, suddenly vanish, replaced by forest species. Charcoal layers that mark cycles of controlled burning disappear, suggesting fields were abandoned. At the same time, evidence of major flooding appears. Deposits of silt and sand in places where only soil should be, signs that rivers swelled beyond their banks. One striking example comes from the Orinoco Basin, where geological studies reveal dramatic flood events around 2,000 years ago, precisely when many Amazonian cultures were thriving. These events likely devastated farmlands, drowned settlements, and forced communities to relocate. To those who lived through them, the catastrophe must have felt apocalyptic. To their descendants, it became myth, floods sent by gods, serpents, or spirits to cleanse the world. Even the Upano Valley itself may have suffered such cycles. While the cause of its eventual collapse remains debated, pollen data suggest abrupt ecological shifts. Cultivated fields vanished, secondary forest growth surged. Was this the aftermath of a great flood, one remembered in myth but untraceable in stone? If so, then the legends of rising waters are not just metaphor but memory, oral records of cataclysms encoded in story so that no one would forget. The symbolism of floods goes beyond destruction. In myth, floods also bring renewal. Just as the serpent sheds its skin, floods strip away what is old, making way for new life. In this sense, myths of deluge are also myths of rebirth. After the waters recede, survivors plant new crops, build new villages, and inaugurate new cycles of time. Civilization itself is understood as fragile, periodically erased, yet always capable of returning. The global resonance is remarkable. The Maya, in their Popol Vuh, tell of earlier worlds destroyed by water and wind before the current age of humanity. In Hindu cosmology, each kalpa ends with dissolution, sometimes by flood, before a new world emerges. In Polynesian traditions, chants recall islands swallowed by the sea, while in Aboriginal Australian songlines, floods mark the transition between Dreamtime eras. The Amazon's flood myths fit seamlessly into this planetary chorus of cyclical destruction and renewal. Imagine a night long ago in the Upano Valley. Elders gather children around a fire in the plaza. The air is heavy with the scent of rain, the river swollen from storms. A shaman chants of the great flood that came before, when rivers rose like serpents and drowned the world. His voice warns that it could come again, that vigilance and respect are the only safeguards. The children listen wide-eyed, the story sinking into memory. Centuries later, archaeologists find signs of sudden abandonment, and in oral traditions the story survives. History dissolves into myth, and myth preserves history in return. For us, these myths invite humility. Modern science charts climate change, river dynamics, and rainfall cycles with data and models. Yet the ancients already knew, through story, that water could erase everything. They left us not just warnings, but a worldview. Civilizations rise, but floods, literal and symbolic, will come again. Floods of time are not only about rivers, they are about forgetting and remembering. Just as water drowns cities, silence drowns memory. The Upano Valley was erased twice, once by actual ecological collapse and again by the disbelief of scholars who insisted the Amazon was empty. Its rediscovery is itself a kind of flood reversal, the waters of silence receding to reveal a city beneath. And so we stand at another threshold, piecing together myths, sediments, and ruins into a story of cycles. The flood is both warning and invitation, to see history not as a straight line, but as a spiral of destruction and renewal. If floods reshaped Amazonian time, what else flowed across the basin, binding valley to valley? Beyond water and myth, there were also networks of exchange, threads of trade, ritual, and knowledge that once wove the Amazon into a vast cultural web. The Upano Valley astonishes on its own, but its true significance emerges when viewed not in isolation, but as part of a larger fabric. Across the Amazon basin, scattered clues suggest that ancient societies were not solitary sparks of ingenuity, but nodes in a vast web of exchange. Trade, ritual, and knowledge once flowed through this basin as easily as rivers, weaving distant communities together. Over time, the threads loosened, the web unraveled, and the network vanished into silence. Archaeologists trace this network through artifacts that travelled far from their origins. In settlements of the lowland Amazon, they find obsidian blades that come from volcanic sources high in the Andes, proof that goods crossed formidable landscapes, carried through valleys and along rivers. In other sites, seashells from the Pacific coast appear, polished into ornaments. Their presence deep in the rainforest tells of journeys across hundreds of kilometres, linking mountains, coasts, and jungle. Each object is a thread, a line in the map of exchange. The threads were not only of stone and shell, crops themselves travelled these routes. Maize, domesticated in Mesoamerica, made its way into Amazonian diets. Peanuts and coca leaves, native to the Andes, appear in contexts far from their origin. From the forest flowed manioc and cacao, carried outward to become staples in other regions. These movements were not accidents of drift, but the result of networks where knowledge and plants were exchanged along the same waterways as pottery and tools. Ceramics also speak the language of connection. Similar designs, spirals, cross-hatching, concentric circles, appear across widely separated sites. A pot made in the Upano Valley might bear motifs familiar to communities in Acre or Marajo. Whether through direct trade or shared traditions, the repetition of symbols suggests cultural dialogue, a conversation carried not by words but by clay. Imagine travelling the basin 2,000 years ago. A canoe glides down a tributary, its hull heavy with cassava, flour, fruit, and pottery. At each village along the way, goods are exchanged: obsidian for food, shells for woven mats, stories for songs. By the time the canoe reaches another valley, its cargo has changed entirely. Yet the journey itself has bound communities together, knotting them into a web of interdependence. This picture echoes other parts of the world. In North America, the city of Cahokia thrived around 1100 CE. Its earthen mounds linked to far-flung trade routes carrying copper, shells, and stone across the continent. In Japan, the Jomon people sustained networks that moved obsidian, amber, and jade across islands. In each case, complexity did not require empires or writing. It was sustained by exchange, ritual, and shared tradition. The Amazon, too, was part of this global pattern. The network was not only economic but spiritual. Myths and rituals travelled alongside goods. Serpent legends echo across the basin, reshaped but recognisable from one region to another. Ceremonial practices, feasts, dances, offerings, likely spread through gatherings that brought communities together at plazas like Quilimopes. Each meeting was more than trade. It was the reaffirmation of a cultural fabric larger than any single valley. And yet, this fabric was fragile. When populations declined, whether from climate change, disease, or internal fracture, the threads loosened. A causeway overgrown by vines was not just a lost road, it was a broken line of communication. A plaza, emptied of ritual, was not only silence, but the unravelling of a network that once stretched for hundreds of kilometres. Over time, the web dissolved, leaving only scattered nodes that seemed isolated when rediscovered centuries later. Picture the Amazon as it may have looked at its height, rivers busy with canoes, plazas alive with rituals, causeways stretching into distance. Now picture it centuries later, the same rivers flowing, but no canoes, no voices. The network is gone, yet the rivers endure, indifferent and eternal. The silence is so complete that even memory falters, convincing outsiders that nothing had ever existed. The rediscovery of Upano and its neighbours allows us to glimpse that lost web. It shows us that the Amazon was not a collection of isolated tribes, but a cultural system, woven together by trade, myth and knowledge. Its vanishing reminds us that civilizations need not collapse in fire to disappear. Sometimes they unravel quietly, leaving behind not ruins, but patterns too faint to see until the forest itself is peeled back. The network that once bound the basin has vanished, but its echoes remain in shards of pottery, in pollen buried in soil, in myths still told by descendants. These fragments remind us that civilization does not always end. Sometimes it transforms, slipping into silence, waiting for us to notice the threads again. Dawn drapes itself across the Upano Valley, mist curling low over an unbroken canopy. To the eye, there is only forest, but beneath that silence lies a city. Platforms aligned in forgotten order, causeways stretching straight beneath the roots, plazas where thousands once gathered. The jungle has not destroyed these places. It has kept them, folded them into itself, breathing over them for centuries. We began with a revelation. In 2024, lasers traced patterns of geometry beneath the leaves and revealed that the Amazon had once been urban. But revelation is only a beginning. The Upano Valley is no longer only a story of discovery, it is a reminder that history itself is incomplete, that what we think of as wilderness may be archives waiting to be read. And what we have read so far is astonishing. Garden cities blending soil and ceremony, a mosaic of platforms stretching for miles, rivers serving as highways, myths as blueprints, soils as monuments, parallels to Angkor, to Cahokia, to Jomon, all suggesting that civilization wears many faces, not only the stone and writing of the old world. Ghost populations whisper through DNA, explorers left chronicles dismissed as fantasy, myths speak of floods that reset time. Together they tell us this: the Amazon was never empty, it was alive with memory. But the forest does not yield everything at once. LIDAR has scanned only a fraction of its expanse. For every kilomope revealed, how many more lie hidden? For every shard of pottery unearthed, how many symbols remain unread? The silence is not absence, it is potential. The canopy still breathes, hiding cities that may yet rise again in the light. Imagine standing at dawn on a platform in Kilomope, 2,000 years ago. The valley hums with voices, fields stretch fertile with Terra Preta, rivers shine like silver arteries. Then imagine the same dawn today. Only mist and birdsong, yet beneath your feet the memory of that world endures. Past and present overlap, folded in time, waiting for us to listen. So the question is not only what we have found, but what we still refuse to see. The Amazon's first civilization may have risen in the Upano Valley 2,500 years ago, but its last secret has not yet been told. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time? If these journeys into silence and memory stir your curiosity, consider subscribing, and together we'll keep walking into the mysteries still breathing beneath the canopy.